friends, it's Kim at Foggy Bonnet. I have two cards to share with you today. One is made from a piece cut from the other, and the technique used to make both cards is called the floating frame technique. This technique was developed by a very talented card maker named Jennifer McGuire. You can find Jennifer on YouTube. And you can find the secret weapon for making a floating frame card in the grocery store. It's press and seal made by Glad, and I'll be showing you how you use this surprising product in these cards today. It's called a floating frame because the frame is made of die cuts that are popped up on Stampin' Dimensionals, and so it looks like that frame is just floating on the front of this card. And then the second piece, or the second card, is made from the piece that's cut from the middle here, and it's same thing. It looks like it's just floating there on the card. The sentiments that I used in my two cards are from the Hello Dear Friend all-inclusive kit that will be out on January 5th with the new catalog. And the stamps that I used are from the Forever Blossoms. The stamps and the dies are from the Forever Blossoms bundle. These are cherry blossoms. It's a real pretty set from the annual catalog. I stamped my images with, soft suede, and the sentiments are stamped with soft suede. The cardstock that I used is Crumbcake along with Whisper White. And then I have a few of the pearl embellishments on this one. I didn't add any to this one. So anyway, it's a fun technique. Let's jump in and get started. I prepared a few things ahead of time off camera just so this video wouldn't be too long. And one of the things I did was I stamped my images and die cut them. And I colored them with colored pencils from the Assortment 2 watercolor pencils. I used Garden Green and Flirty Flamingo. These stamps are distinctives. That means they have shading built in. So I really only needed to go in and just barely add a little bit of color to these to make them look the way I wanted. I didn't want to use alcohol markers because I was going for a more subtle look. Next, I'm going to lay my die cuts on a piece of cardstock that measures 5 1/4 by 4 inches. I'm just laying these on, I'm not gluing them. And this piece of cardstock will actually be discarded later. It's just a support right now for my die cuts. And it takes a little bit of maneuvering to get them the way you want. You want to be happy with what you've got. That fills up the area nicely. So next I'm going to take a piece of the press and seal. And I didn't realize when I bought this that it has a pattern on it, which is a little bit distracting to me, but it works. Now this press and seal is like sticky notes. It has bubbles of adhesive on the back of it. And when you press it onto your cardstock or whatever you're pressing it onto, those little bubbles of adhesive burst and adhere the press and seal to your surface. I have found through experience that this is a little stickier than I thought it was, and I did ruin a piece of cardstock on my first go around because it really adhered. You want to lay it down on top of this and you want it to hold everything in place, but I wouldn't press too terribly hard on everything. You can kind of see when you press on it where it's where you've burst those little bubbles and it's adhered, but you don't want to get a vice grip here on your subsurface. You just want it to hold things in place. And I'm going to trim off this excess over here. And just get that out of the way. And I think I've got Everything's stuck down. There we go. So what we're going to do next is we're going to trim down the die cuts to the size of this rectangle. This is going to determine, the rectangle is going to determine the final size of that floating frame. So I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to trim off. My big scissors are in the other room because I was wrapping Christmas presents. So you just want to come along the back of this and trim along the edge of your cardstock rectangle. Okay, so now I have the outside perimeter trimmed to the correct size. So I have my piece on a die cutting plate because I'm going to cut the center out of it. Some people like to peel the backing off, the support off, and just put the die cuts with the press and seal on their cutting plate. I choose to keep my die cuts on the backing. And here I'm showing you the stitched rectangle that I used, and it is the 2 1/4 by 3 1/2 inch rectangle from the stitched rectangle set. Once I get it centered, I will attach it with a little bit of washi tape to keep it from moving around, because once I have this centered on my die cuts here, I don't want it to move when I start it through the die cutting machine. So I've cut my rectangle. First I'm going to get rid of the washi tape and the die. There we go. And I'm going to pop out the die cut center carefully. These stitched rectangles sometimes get embedded into the cardstock a little bit. The stitching gets embedded. So you just have to carefully remove it. And we'll set this aside for the second card. The next step in the process is to peel the backing off of our press and seal and the die cuts. So we want to peel it off while keeping the die cuts attached to the press and seal. So I'm just finding a corner here and getting it started. And this is the backing is a throwaway piece. You could use it for another project, but we're not going to use it in this card. So I'm just going to work my way around, just carefully peeling off the press and seal and keeping the die cuts attached to it. I'm also being careful that I don't let the press and seal stick to itself. Okay, so I have it detached. I'll get rid of this piece. I have my detached die cuts still on the press and seal face down on my work surface, and the next step is to attach Stampin' Dimensionals to the backs of the die cuts. I'm using regular and mini Stampin' Dimensionals. When I need to, I will cut them to fit in the smaller areas. We want our dies to be well supported. This process takes a few minutes, so I'm going to speed it up a little bit. Once I have all of the backings removed, I will carefully adhere this frame to the card front. I'm going to open this card front so it lays flat. And I'll just center it, eyeball it. The more die cuts you have on your press and seal, the sturdier it is and the easier this part is. I don't have it quite as full as maybe it could be, so I'm getting a little bit of sagging here in parts, but I'll work with it. There we go. So the adhesives, the Stampin' Dimensionals that is, are stickier than the press and seal. So now when I lift the press and seal, the die cuts should stay on the card front. And I want to be careful here because, like I said, this press and seal is stickier than you think. I just want to go slowly so I don't lift off the surface of my die cuts. It's when you're pulling from an edge that you run the risk, the highest risk of having the surface of your cardstock peel away. Just go slow. Work your way around. This really is amazing stuff. So right here would be a place where I would be concerned because I'm starting an edge. So I'm going to go slowly there, and it looks fine. So I'm going to keep going. I think when it runs through the die cutting machine, it also gets compressed a little more. There we go. The next thing I'll do is adhere my sentiment. This sentiment is from the Hello Dear Friend All-Inclusive Card Kit, which will be available January 5th. It's in the brand new catalog. And I'm going to pop it up on Dimensionals also. Just right in the middle. Okay, so pop this right in the middle. And then to fill in some of these empty spaces, I'm going to use Pearl Basic Jewels. Just a couple of those. So I filled in with a few Pearl Basic Jewels, and there's my card. I really like how this turned out. I was going for a very subtle, kind of old-fashioned look, and I think I got that. And I think I'm going to add one or two more jewels on the sentiment piece now that I'm looking at this. I think that will tie it together nicely. I like how it looks with the additional pearls. And that finishes our first card. I want to show you now how I made the second card. It's made with the piece that we cut out of the middle of the frame from the first card. So here's the piece that we had left over. And the same process, you want to just peel the throwaway piece of cardstock off your die cuts. You want to leave the die cuts on the press and seal, but remove that backing. There we go, and you can just set this, you don't need this piece, it won't be used in the card. So now what we want to do is apply our Stampin' Dimensionals. And again, I always put the big ones on first, and then I fill in with little ones. Okay, so I have the back pretty well supported with Stampin' Dimensionals, and now I want to adhere this to a rectangle that's cut with the same size die that the original piece was cut out of. And that makes lining it up a little bit tricky. You could make this piece bigger. You could use the next size up die if you wanted to, or just cut a plain rectangle, but I'm just going to take my time and line this up. Everything's supported by the press and seal, so I'm not too concerned about getting it lined up. Not too concerned, but a little concerned. But I'll just try to look down directly on top and just eyeball as best as I can. And then just let those dimensionals grab hold, and then carefully peel off the press and seal. Try to find a place where I can get it. And again, remember, it's best not to start at a corner, because then you risk having that cardstock peel away with the Stampin' Seal. So you just want to go slowly, take your time with this, and peel it up. I was about to get that corner to peel up right there, so I went to a different spot. So I'll work all around it. Like I said, when you send this through the die cutting machine, it does adhere it pretty good. So you just take your time. There, I got that corner safely peeled away. Now there's a sharp corner right there, so I'm going to avoid coming at that directly if I can. There we go. Just have to work with it. There we go. So now we have our piece. And I already have the layers prepared here. I have a 5 1/4 by 4 inch piece of Crumbcake. And on top of that, I have a 5 by 3 3/4 piece of Whisper White, and I've stamped my sentiment down here in the corner. So I'm just going to adhere this right in the center, and I'm going to use my Stampin' Seal. Put this right in the middle, square it up as best as I can. I'm looking at the die cuts, and it kind of distracts me from the edges that I should be looking at to line this up. Next, we apply Stampin' Seal to the back of the piece so that we can adhere it to the card front. And that finishes our second card. Let's get the first one in here. There we go. This is a very fun and a little bit challenging technique, probably not for beginners, but if you can find the press and seal, that is your secret weapon on this card. I did have a little trouble locating it when I was looking for it, but I finally found it in a local grocery store. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about today's floating frame project, please reach out to me at foggybonnet@gmail.com. That's foggybonnet@gmail.com. See you next time.